Good afternoon and welcome to another Monday Mission Moment. Today, rather than using a quote from Tattoos on the Heart by Father Greg Boyle, I'd like to use a concept that we often talked about when I was working with Greg back in 2002. And it was part of another book that was written before Tattoos on the Heart. But it was the concept of the portrait and the mirror. And in the sense of gangs, and the young men and women that we worked with who were trying to get out of the gangs, often there was a portrait of them painted by society, by people around them. And the portrait was not the realistic portrayal of who they were. The portrait, of course, held up by society was that portrait of the gang member, the drug dealer, the person who could never change, but never the mirror. Never reflecting back who they actually were. And sometimes in life we can hold up a portrait of someone, we can create a portrait of someone that comes from perhaps information that we claim in our heads, perhaps information that is bits and pieces, perhaps information that is not a true indicator of who they are. Often we can do this with members of our family. Often we can do this with the people we interact with. Often we can do this with the students that we engage on a day-to-day basis. Often we can do this with any other person in the room. We paint a portrait of who we think they are, when in reality what God would have us do is hold up the mirror and reflect back to them who they truly are, that would reflect back to them that they are far greater than the worst thing that they've ever done, that they are exactly what God made them to be. They are exactly who God had in mind when God created them out of love. Exactly who God has in mind when He creates each one of us out of love. And this was a concept that we worked with in the earlier times when I was at Homeboy Industries, that when we would come across young men and women who could only see the portrait that had been held up to them, that said, "This is who you are," rather than a mirror that portrayed, that reflected back to them who in fact they really were. We are all created in God's image and God's likeness. We are all born with a common human dignity. We are all loved by the God who created us. So let's pray for that grace this week. Let's pray for the grace to, rather than paint portraits of people, to hold up the mirror, to reflect back to all who we come in contact with the love that they were created in. Thank you, and we'll see you next week.